Mr. Garish, when this committee was debating Trade Promotion Authority 2 years ago, it passed my amendment into law that barred fast-track procedures for any trade agreement with a country on Tier 3 of the State Department's Trafficking in Persons Report, a group of countries that fail to combat human trafficking. Following that amendment, we saw an unprecedented politicalization of the TIP report, where countries were upgraded based on unrelated factors, one of those being trade, in my opinion. If confirmed, you will oversee our trading relationships with several countries that have poor records on combating human trafficking. Will you commit to us that, if confirmed, you will not take any action to attempt to influence the TIP report, the Trafficking in Persons report?
Yes, I will confirm that, Senator, and I will act in accordance with the requirements of TPA.
Will the administration seek to negotiate, to your knowledge, any trade agreements with countries currently or recently on Tier 3 of the TIP report?
Senator, of course, I'm not in the administration and don't know what discussions have taken place.
In preparation for this hearing, I'm sure you've had some conversations. Do you have any understanding from those preparations that they intend to pursue such?
I have no understanding of those preparations.
I hope you'll be an advocate of observing the law that Congress put into effect.
I will, Senator, and if confirmed, I look forward to working with you to make sure that we do that.
Let me ask you, when Ambassador Lighthizer was last before this committee in June, he emphasized how important it is that we obtain enforceable labor provisions in agreements. Recent press reports suggest that the administration is advocating for an optional dispute settlement mechanism as it relates to NAFTA, which could be I know you're not going to be involved in NAFTA from the position you've been nominated to, but it could be a forerunner of other agreements as we look at other countries. And that would mean that parties could choose whether or not to subject themselves to the enforcement of the deal, including labor obligations. Do you believe that an optional dispute mechanism is an effective way to make our labor obligations enforceable by other countries?
Senator, I don't know exactly the exact details of what this optional dispute settlement mechanism would be and what issues it would cover and whether it would cover labor or just other types of issues. I do think it's important for us to have strong and enforceable labor provisions in our trade agreements, and certainly would work to do that. And
well, if you make a party, okay, so you say you don't know the specifics. Well, let me ask you abstractly, since you're an expert attorney. Parties choosing whether or not to subject themselves to the enforcement of the deal. What's the value of having a deal, whether it be about labor or any other element, where the parties can choose whether or not to subject themselves to the enforcement of the deal? Then how is that ultimately a truly enforceable deal?
Well, I think there may be situations where it is appropriate to have optional dispute settlement as part of an agreement. However, I understand your point. I understand the concern, and certainly, if confirmed, would want to work with you to ensure that we have strong and enforceable provisions.
An optional dispute settlement would be maybe a alternative way of still submitting yourselves to the obligations of the agreement, but finding a different way. For example, arbitration. That's a little different than what's being discussed here. Let me turn to one other question with you. Back in April, the President said he would be willing to accommodate China in our trade disputes if they applied pressure to deal with North Korea. He then went on to say that labeling China a currency manipulator would be counterproductive to securing that cooperation. But back in June, the President conceded this strategy didn't work. So my question to you now, that the President has acknowledged that China is either unable or unwilling to put pressure on North Korea, will you recommend to Ambassador Lighthizer and the President to follow through with the trade enforcement measures that the President called for during the campaign?
Senator, I believe we need to take strong enforcement measures against China where appropriate. I think there are a number of issues we have with China, and it is going to be important for us, if I am confirmed, to get in there and assess all of the different issues, and for us to use all the tools available to us under U.S. law and under the WTO agreements to be able to take strong action against China.
I'm going to follow up with you on some questions for the records. My time is just about expired, but I'm looking forward to hearing your specifics on that. Finally, Mr. Kearns, let me ask you, my understanding is that anti-dumping and countervailing duty statute right now does not give purchasers and end users the same legal status as domestic producers, importers, or even foreign exporters or governments. They're not regarded as so-called interested parties. I also understand that the ITC sends out questionnaires to purchasers and end users and demands that they answer, with one reason being that the information from the purchasers and end users is among the most valuable to the ITC in determining how competition is occurring in the U.S. market. There are manufacturing jobs in New Jersey that could be impacted by the ITC's determination in this area. So I want to understand, this is my one question, how much value and weight do you think the Commission should place on submission from purchasers and end users?
Thank you, Senator. In private practice, I was very involved in reviewing those kinds of questionnaires, and I was always very impressed by the fact that that both producers in the domestic industry as well as purchasers seem to answer those questions very carefully, thoroughly, and without bias one way or the other. So I do believe that their input can be very valuable to the process.
I have a follow-up question, but I'll yield this since my time is up.